With rising input costs, how can farmers get their best return on their fertilizer investments? I'm Sherry Cook, and in this series, we'll be talking to farmers, advisors, and experts, and we're going to see how they're advancing crop nutrition. I spent the day today with Granvil Travis and Steve Foss talking about ROFI, Return on Fertilizer Investment. We actually went out into the field and we sampled their soil.
Usually I'm on a side-by-side whenever I do this, taking grid samples every 2.5 acres. So I usually try to pull 6 cores around the side-by-side and then dump it back in the bag and take off to the next.
And now you use a program, right? So you can track where you're pulling your samples every year, so you're in that same vicinity, right?
Right. I should be within a foot of where I pulled 2 years or 4 years before.
So it keeps it nice and consistent.
Right.
And then you'll mix it together and then you'll put it in the bag and you ship it off. Where do you guys send it to?
I've been using Seal Labs out of Georgia because that's where the total acre guys
A lot of mine goes
recommend.
to KSI.
Okay.
This field is a, what do you say, 64-acre field. There's probably 6 different soil types out here.
Right.
Right.
Hence why you do the grid.
Right. That's why we
Right.
do the grid.
So we can get more of an even.
Because we're kind of here in the sandier ground and you get down off this ridge and you'll turn into like a black gumbo.
That's where I live. That's what we have.
Yeah.
Gumbo.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's go down and get some gumbo ground.
Okay. Well, that'll work.
So this is the heavier ground?
Right. You can tell it's already starting to kind of crack open a little bit right here on top. And so we'll pull a couple samples here. And you'll actually be able to see here in this core, this is not going to fall apart like the sandier ground will, so it's going to actually be harder to mix. But you can actually pull this out. Instead of just crumbling like the other cores, this will actually stay together in more of the shape.
And this is the stuff that is wet before dinner and too dry after dinner.
Right. Lunchtime dirt.
Lunchtime dirt. I haven't heard of that one before.
Yep.
So what are our pHs in this neck of the woods?
So on ground that we have VRT'd for the last 20 years, we usually never see much get below 5.7, 5.8, and then we'll correct it every 4 years. On some of the farms that we pick up, we've seen them as low as 4.4.
And so you're liming, correct?
And so we'll go in there and we'll lime that ground when we first get it and soil sample it and get that back in par so we have optimum fertilizer uptake.
And the reason we lime, right, is so that we increase our pH a little bit.
pH and get everything stable in the ground so that each item in the ground can work.
Right.
Get that best growing
Balance.
condition.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. We'll aim for about a 6.7, 6.8.
The reason you keep the pH, try to keep it balanced, is because one thing you keep a balance in the nutrients, but then also your chemical works better or worse at low or high.
Correct.
So you need to be in the middle.
Right. And the same with nutrients, right? When it comes to whether it's nitrogen, phosphorus, whatever, they work differently too on higher pH, lower pH. Hence why we lime.
Right.
And you have to have the balance for all the nutrients, not just the NP and K, but the sulfur, zinc, and all the micros too.
After we went out and took some really good samples, we continued the conversation about how to keep your fields healthy. But before we get to that, let's go to Dr. Ross Bender to talk more about what advanced crop nutrition means.
What we're sharing with you is a concept called advanced crop nutrition. B plus B equals A. Balanced crop nutrition with your best-in-class leading mineral nutrition sources, along with biological crop nutrition with your leading bioscience technologies equals the A, advanced crop nutrition. Together, when you bring the best of both of those technologies, we see significant improvements in crop nutrient use efficiency. All right, Sherry, back to you to finish up soil sampling.
All right, so what do we got?
So the first one here will be our gumbo dirt. You can see where the cores are still stuck together a lot more than our more sandy dirt here that falls apart.
So this is just an example of 2 different soil types here. What about the rest of your farm?
We can go across the field with one planter pass and hit 7, 8 different soil types. We have a lot of different variability that we work with. Sometimes it makes it harder to pinpoint the right variety for a field, and sometimes we even split fields kind of to change the varieties for the different soil types.
And when you fertilize, you're variable rating your fertilizer as well, right?
Right. So when we take these cores on 2.5 acre grids, pretty well we're treating every 2.5 acres as its own field. And so as we transition from a gumbo or a sandier type silt loam, we will look at those results and put those into our computer and make prescriptions so that we are efficient with our fertilizer and we're not under applying or over applying. And that way every soil is treated to exactly what it needs.
So how many nutrients are you normally putting out? I mean, besides your NPK, are you doing some of the micros as well? Or what else are you adding in there?
In the past, it was just pretty well the only thing we were doing was the P, the K, and the pH. And now we're starting to incorporate micros and ratios of those macros into how we make decisions to apply our fertilizer.
So you've been doing this for several years. What are you noticing on your yields?
For one, they go up, and so then you have to raise your yield goals and you apply more fertilizer to kind of get to the next plateau of what your soil needs to be capable of those higher yields.
Everybody has a time that they say to put on nutrients, but we're learning when the correct time is by doing the tissue samples and having that history, and we're putting the fertilizer where the ground needs it. And therefore, we're raising yields across the field instead of just in one spot.
Right.
And like some of the, like used to, we would spread a blend of like DAP and potash across every acre every year. And now, actually this field south of us that we pulled the samples out of, since we've started doing VRT technology, it has not got a single pound of phosphorus put on it. But it has called for a lot of potash. So we've reallocated those dollars from a blanket spread with DAP that we didn't need to all potash, and we're just applying more potash, and we have seen the yields go higher up because we're feeding the crop what it needs and not putting money out there that's wasted. Once you get some of this VRT done, sometimes you can go back to a blanket spread on certain fields because you've had everything leveled out and built up to where it needs to be, that you just have to spread a maintenance program.
4 R's at the ultimate.
Exactly.
Right?
That's
Get
right.
the right product, right place, right time. And
Exactly.
so starting with the soil tests, layering on the tissue samples, right? And ultimately increasing our yield. This is what we're shooting for.
I mean, that's the whole goal.
Yeah,
Return on investment for what we use.
right.
And like a lot of places where we're not spreading DAP, we can reallocate those dollars to the micros. And a lot of times we don't spend any more money an acre, but we're improving our yield because we're giving it what it needs. And I think that's the biggest payback, is we're not wasting money on fertilizer, but we're reallocating those dollars and we're not spending any more to increase yield.
I've got guys that are soil testing every year,
Right.
depending upon the crop, right? Or at least every 2 years, just to, like you, stay on top of what we have and what we don't have.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. You have to know that, and the only way you know that is with soil test. I mean, to me, that's the #1 key to all this, is having a soil test.
That's the best place to start.
That's the best place to start.
Yeah. Stay tuned for episode 2 and learn how biologicals can play an important role on advancing your crop nutrition. For more information on how you can get the best ROFI, visit cropnutrition.com.